Okay, and I see that we have Bert. Welcome, everyone. I'm flipping back to my other page. And welcome to the SFO Roundtable Ground-Based Noise Subcommittee of July 21st, 2022. I call this meeting to order. And we are meeting via teleconference, via Zoom. And today we are joined by our staff members, Angela Montez, Roundtable Administrative Secretary, Kathleen Wentworth, our new Roundtable Coordinator. Welcome, Kathleen, and so happy to have you with us. And Jean Rendell, our Technical Consultant from HMMH. We also have with us, and do we have them? I'm checking.
I don't see them yet, no.
Okay, well, we do have Bert Guinong, and I think we've got a couple of other staff members. We have,
don't know
and
yet.
then we're gonna do roll call. But we also have Linda Wolin from Supervisor Dave Pine's office and guests. So with that, really do need two computers, two monitors anyway. Kathleen, is there anyone else we should recognize?
It looks as if we have Brian Perkins from Congresswoman Jackie Spears' office. And we have Lisa Azosa from the County of San Mateo Planning Department. And that's all I see. Please, Angela, let me know if there's someone else we've missed.
I believe you've got it. Thank you.
Excellent. And if we miss someone, please raise your hands. Kathleen, Angela, or I will see that. And we can make sure that you are recognized. If we could please do roll call.
Roll call for today. Chair Ann Schneider.
Present.
Member Al Royce.
Present.
And Member Tom Hamilton.
Present.
Fantastic. Thank you. We do have a quorum. Just for the public record, our committees now have 3 recognized members, so we are 3 for 3.
Nice.
And now if I don't see any other roundtable members present, although it is always great to have both Ms. Wolin and Mr. Perkins from our regional offices here with us. So thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Perkins and Ms. Wolin. And I don't see any other hands raised. If we could open up for the public, this is our chance for the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda. If you could please raise your hand, you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Schneider. So yes, for those attending the meeting on the Zoom video conference, we will use the raise hand feature in order to organize any public comments. During the general comment public period, and for each item on the regular agenda, I will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click the raise hand feature to speak on that agenda item. For those joining by phone, you may press *9 to indicate your desire to speak and *6 to unmute once called upon. We will prompt you when you may begin speaking, and as Chair Schneider noted, it will be 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mondes. Do we have anybody who is speaking for items not on the agenda?
Thank you, Chair. And at the moment, I do not see any virtual hands raised for items not on the agenda.
Yeah, I don't see any hands raised too. So with that, I'm going to, let me go back to panelists just in case. Very good. Close this item. And thank you. Thank you. And is there a motion to set the agenda and approve consent item number 1?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Royce and Mr. Hamilton. If we could call the vote, please.
Chair Schneider.
Yes.
Mayor Royce.
Yes.
Member Hamilton.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. All right, on to regular agenda. We now move to item number 2. This is discussion on takeoff, backblast noise, how to define and obtain data on operating and environmental variables. And I know, well, we don't have this in front of you. Some of the comments when Kathleen and Angela and I talked about what's been happening the last couple of months and where we should go, we brainstormed some items. So I'm just going to list these off just to kickstart the other members and members of the public or staff who are in attendance. First of all, backblast or takeoff noise impacts affects many northern San Mateo County communities. The noise impact is particularly intrusive when it occurs during the nighttime hours. Many hours during the nighttime have significantly reduced air traffic volume, and we might consider if there's some creative nighttime measures that might help. And I believe, Kathleen, correct me, this means on which runways are used or which procedure to take off is used. I'd like us to
Yes.
discuss the possible operational and environmental variables that might increase or decrease backblast noise, and whether, if we look into it this way, we can find any promise that might provide relief, and especially in the nighttime period. That our consultant, HMMH consultant, Jean Rendell, and the SFO Noise Office Manager, Bert Winong, are available for comment and questions. And then I think, Kathleen, if you could please share slide 2. And at this point, I'm putting this in the hands of Kathleen for this agenda item.
Okay. One of the screens, I just wanted to bring at least some idea of a visual for your discussion of this. And this you will recognize from your wonderful HMMH study. And this is just a compilation of 3 different pages that I wanted to put up here so that you could have a chance to kind of compare them. The far left shows takeoffs from runway 1 left only, the middle one from 1 right only, and the third one from simultaneous takeoffs from left and right. And this is a common configuration at San Francisco. At San Francisco, as most of you know, the landings take place on the horizontal runway depicted here, that on 28 and 28 left and right. And the departures generally take place on runways 1 left and right for the majority of the time. So the question becomes, as Mayor Snyder pointed out, there may be other discussion items that aren't covered here, such as a completely different runway. But I wanted to talk about just for the moment, whether or not there's anything to discuss on simultaneous versus individual runway takeoffs. By that, are you better off perhaps to have 2 simultaneous airplanes taking off? Maybe it makes a bigger noise. That's what you have to look at the data for. Or maybe you'd prefer to have single left and single right takeoffs, and that makes less noise but more events. That's an item I just don't know the answer to. And I would suggest that if this were something you would want to consider, you'd have to be in a position to gather some data, number 1, and number 2, to expect that these kinds of choices are probably going to be available only at the nighttime, and then only with significant cooperation from our friends in the tower. But it's something to consider. And I think the only other thing to say is that if you think this bears some discussion, further discussion, we might want to get one more data set on this to show the far right screen with these airplanes a little bit staggered further than they are. So in other words, have one down almost to the middle of the runway and one at the start of the runway, because that happens on a more typical manner. And that's something we'd have to check in with on the tower and see what would be the appropriate places. But I know Jean has done quite a bit of work on low frequency of late here and elsewhere. So I just wanted to give this screen for you guys, and Jean and Bert can fill in all the other information that you have. Jean?
Yeah, I'll go first. Because one of the things you mentioned, Kathleen, was we didn't have a chance to talk about this beforehand, and apologize for that, but you mentioned simultaneous departures. I don't believe they can actually depart simultaneously. There has to be at least some space in between them. So you would still get individual events really closely spaced, but they would still seem to be 2 individual events, if rather than a single event. It would sound like 2 separate events just close together. I just wanted to state that I don't think completely simultaneous is even possible given the runway spacing.
Thank you for clarifying it. I did not, that was my mistake for being not clear on that. They do, as I say, stagger with one of them halfway down, give or take. And so the question was, do they want one left and one right separate, or them having staggered as whatever the tower requires for their minimum stagger, which is significant. But the question I don't know is that noise additive? Does it make it worse? Or is it like a Bose noise canceling where you can, you might cancel the waves in a certain way? I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, they certainly don't cancel each other. They are
Darn.
additive, you know, and if they both took off together and they were the exact same aircraft, it would be about 3 to 6 dB increase of noise, but it'd be at the same time. So, you know, it would, but if it is down the runway further, then, you know, I think it's not as additive and it would be just, again, like two separate events. One of the things, I don't know if this is the time to mention it, but we just did a study in Seattle, just finished it like a month or two ago, and very similar results to what we found with this study. But one of the things that came out of that study was a recommendation to do rolling takeoffs. What that means is that the aircraft does not actually stop at the end of the runway and wait for its clearance to depart, but they get the clearance to depart as they're turning onto the runway. And I don't know, because maybe during night this is more possible, but something that maybe Bert can shine a light on. I don't know if they can allow rolling takeoffs here, because one thing that's different here is that you have the intersecting runways, or in Seattle, they only have parallel runways. So they wouldn't have that conflicting traffic. So I think it's difficult, because you want them on the runway ready to take off. And then as soon as one lands on 28 left or 28 right, then they can send the, you know, the departures off. And I've actually sat in San Francisco in the tower years ago and actually watched those operations. And it is kind of a synchronous operation, the way they do it. So I don't know, Bert, if you have any thoughts on potential rolling takeoffs here at San Francisco.
You're correct, Gene, especially during the busier times of day. It is definitely a stoplight situation where you have left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand for the synchronicity of it. But during slower times, there may be a possibility of it. I can't speak for the tower, but it'd definitely be worthwhile asking.
Yeah, I can say that I've flown out of San Francisco a few times. And of all those times, I have probably a handful or less were times that they didn't come to a complete stop. And I just think it was a pilot not wanting to come to a complete stop, which is different than a rolling takeoff. Because a rolling takeoff, how you get the noise reduction is that they have some power as they turn onto the runway. And then rather than slowing down and stopping, they just increase the power. And of course, on a jet engine, well, I shouldn't say of course, but the thing about a jet engine is it takes time to spool up. What that means is that they will increase the power, but it'll have a few second delay before it really gets to that power setting, meaning that as it's rolling down the runway, it's increasing in power, which means that it won't be at the end of the runway when it's at full power. It'll be somewhere down the end of the runway. And that is actually a noise benefit. And we have, and I think Vince Mestry, some of you may know Vince, but he has done studies. He's retired since, but he has done studies that showed that you get the reduction behind start of takeoff roll with a rolling takeoff without the detriment on the other end of increasing the noise on the other end, because the airplane gets up and out just as it would at a static departure, meaning that it goes up to full power and then starts rolling down the runway. So anyway, that's where the noise reduction comes in. If I wasn't clear on that, ask questions or whatever. But and this is one thing, because you did mention, Anne, at the very beginning, that nighttime is of most concern, and that's probably when traffic is light enough that they could do rolling departures.
Kathleen, do you want, if staff have done their presentations, do you want members to ask any questions? Now I see Member Hamilton's hand is raised.
Absolutely. Whatever the pleasure of the chair.
Okay.
Absolutely.
If you guys are pretty set. So right now, just so we stay on one point, I know that will make it easier for Angela to take minutes and me taking minutes. We're talking about runway 1, left and right departures, nighttime, and what we might be able to do to mitigate noise on that. So Mr. Hamilton, go ahead.
My hand is not raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was. Well,
Sorry.
how about, do you have any questions? And Member Royce, do you have any questions?
Yeah, maybe just a couple. So what we're trying to talk about is methods to reduce noise, particularly at nighttime. And we're looking at the category takeoffs. So I guess what I'm hearing, and Gene, correct me if I got it right, is we're saying that we should avoid, or we should recommend avoidance of near simultaneous takeoffs because the noise is less if there's singular takeoffs, number one. And what are the pros and cons of that? And number two is that the rolling takeoffs appear to be beneficial. I don't know by how much, but we should be recommending that we look at that further. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So on the first point, I don't know whether simultaneous departures are preferred over individual departures, but I also think it's a moot point because I'm pretty sure that you can't do simultaneous departures with the closely spaced runways. There has to be some, space in between them. And so I don't know that simultaneous is even an option here, but yes. One thing you can look at here with the maps and the noise here is whether you want to use one left or one right, that sort of thing. But then also rolling departures. The other thing that comes to mind is also less than full length runway departures. And these runways aren't all that long, so I don't know what the benefit would be. But even if, say, a quarter of the aircraft, a smaller aircraft could take off down the runway a little bit further, we could look at that. And I think that would also be more of a nighttime thing when you have more flexibility. So some of the things to think about are rolling departures and what we call intersection departures, which is just intersections of taxiways further down the runway.
So Gene, I know we need to study, but do you have any feel for what kind of impact either one of those would have on noise? Are we talking a couple decimal points, 10 decimal points? What are we talking about?
Well, if you look at these maps, you can see if you were to move those orangish blobs, sorry for the technical term there, blobs, but if you move them up further along the runway, you can see then that the orange would never get into the community if you move them, just a few hundred feet or so. And so it would just, it would get into the green sooner as well as you go out into the community. So that's what comes to mind when I look at these pictures, is that if you move that down the runway further, you are going to get less noise. And I would think it's on the order of 2 to 6 dB less, which is very noticeable once you get to about 5 or 6 dB.
I'm sorry, how much dB? 4 to 6, you said?
I said 2 to 6, somewhere in there.
2 to 6, I'm sorry, okay.
Just depending how far down the runway you could go by the different aircraft types.
Okay.
And you have more of a chance of doing that on one right than you do one left, because one right is a longer runway as well.
Okay. Thank you, Gene. Well, 2 to 6 is an impact, so that's worth pursuing.
And again, I don't know if any of these are possible, so Bert would have to take it back and work with the tower operators just to see if these things are even possible.
So our objective, and correct me, Madam Chair, is to have a recommendation for further follow-up if you deem it appropriate. Is that what we're saying here?
I think so. When
Okay.
Kathleen and Angela talked about this in prep of this meeting, we were also trying to figure out if there was anything that we collectively can do that might be a win, for want of a better term. To help at least one, if not more, neighborhoods in a tiny bit. The other thing that Kathleen and I talked about is we know that, and for the public, humans can't hear more of a change unless it's 3 decibels or greater. Is that correct, Gene? That was one of the things from the spectral analysis, that the plantings wouldn't reduce it more than 3 decibels, so we wouldn't hear it. So we're looking for something 3 decibels, but also if small incremental changes might get us over that 3 decibel or greater, what's the right word?
Threshold.
There we go. Thank you. Threshold on that. So this was one. So yes, Al, you're spot on.
Okay, great. And I would think the 3 decibel difference at night is more significant during the day because it stands out at night more than it does during the day. So.
Correct. Although
Yeah.
I don't know if we have any Burlingame residents, having listened to them for the number of years, a lot of them we would like to be able to use our backyards during the day and it gets loud. I guess that's one of those things where I've just gotten used to the fact that we stop talking if we're outside when a plane is taking off during the day. But definitely we want people to get a good night's sleep. So if we're using that as our first target, that's it. But I don't want to not remember that the Burlingame people many times bring up the use, golly, what is that term? And it's all of us elected officials, for our residents to be able to enjoy their property. And I'm forgetting the technical term for that, but on that one. I have if you're done, I have a couple of kind of really silly questions.
Yes.
I think, Jean, you talked about it a little bit. So we've got a 1 left and a 1 right departure. They're staggered, but when those low frequency waves start moving into to the cities and then up the hills, do they get louder? Because the spectral analysis showed that yes, whereas only 3 homes in Millbrae, for example, are within the 65 decibel level, at Central Park here in Millbrae, they're quite often at 76 decibels.
Well, as you're seeing in these charts or these graphics here, the noise does continue to fall off the further away you get from the airport, which is very typical. So even though low frequency noise does drop off, it's the reason that you get more low frequency noise is because the buildings and the terrain and just the sound propagation, high frequencies dissipate quicker. And so the high frequencies as you get further away from the airport are less and less pronounced. And so you start to hear the lower frequencies as you move away from the airport while the aircraft is still on the ground. So it doesn't get louder as it gets out further into the community, but it does become less high frequency and more low frequency type noise.
And Kathleen sent me, forgive me, Al, you wrote a series of questions when we got the study back, and we talked about it a year ago, July, and I was reading through those. And in it, Jean, you say that the FAA already takes into account these low frequency waves as they move up the hills. But to me, that doesn't make sense because, again, if you look at the 65 decibel contour, it stops almost at the freeway in Millbrae. And yet people in Hillsborough, people in Burlingame, obviously people under San Bruno, South City for gap departure. Well, the gap departure is taking into account because the airplanes are on top. But it seems to me, because we're in back of the airplanes, that's not taken into account. I can tell you that it's as loud here at my house as it is if I'm at Kaiser in San Bruno on El Camino and 380. And that's a gap departure route. So it just doesn't make sense to me on that. And in your comments back to Al on that letter was that the FAA is taking it in. I have to switch back to that. It's the AEDT, I think.
That's the model that you use, correct.
Yeah, in the ADT model, so I don't get it. Now I know I'm taking us off track. Let me go back to my other silly questions. The rolling runway, to me, that makes sense. It's why we all do California stops, because we're not putting our car to a full stop and then having to gun the engine to get past inertia on that. So I think that would be a definite recommendation to go forward on that. I'm not sure how you do it unless they're kind of swinging around. The other thing that Kathleen and I talked about, and it's on the agenda later, I believe, is how they work during taxiing. And I think I saw in your recommendations, Jean, for CTAC, that maybe they only use one engine for taxiing. I don't know if you can do that. The plane would wobble, wouldn't it?
No, so you're talking about two different things here. So if you're getting a rolling takeoff, you can't taxi with a single engine because you have to be ready to take off. So during rolling takeoffs, you would be taxiing with all the engines running. But what they want to do at CTAC, which they don't do yet, but one of their recommendations at CTAC were for if you don't have clearance departure, is that you just use a single engine to taxi, because you don't need all, well, typically airplanes have 2, but even if they have 4, you can even still taxi with a single engine. And so that is something to look into to see if, the taxi noise can be reduced by doing a single engine taxi operation.
And just for the record, then here's the problem. We didn't get this, and this is no criticism. We didn't get the information about the new CTAC study in time to get it into this agenda. So we'll have
Right.
to continue it, but I hope that we might be able to get it into the next technical working group, which is in September. Kathleen, is that when the next TWG meets?
Angela backed me up, I believe so.
Because it would be lovely to kind of dive down with what the
Sorry.
CTAC study did.
I believe the next time GBN will meet is going to be in November, Chair Snyder.
The next ground-based noise, but the
Ground-based
next, right, which is a long, this is a problem with these long periods. Our brains get fuzzy during that time. So hopefully if we can ask Chair Hindi that maybe we can have a little bit of technical working group to go into what Mr. Rendell has just sent to us from CTAC on that.
Yes, so
But that-
sorry to clarify, yes, technical working group will meet in September along with legislative.
So member Royce and member Hamilton, if you're okay with that, if we might make that a motion, just so that we don't have to wait until November to dive into that new information, would be lovely. And I don't know if we need so that would be another recommendation, member Royce. My other question, where was it? In my time on the roundtable was when the two runways, one left and one right, were extended, made longer. So one went 250 feet and the other one went 450 feet longer and pushed farther, closer to Millbrae, closer to Burlingame and Hillsborough. Was there a reason for that? Was that because of the new, what was the reason for that? And this goes back to when Mr. Rendell said that maybe the smaller planes don't have to take off right from the very beginning of the runway, but can be farther down. And if that is, when we hear that first big thrust boom here in low frequency noise, does it actually move farther up the hills if it's farther down the runway or closer to the front of the runway? Does that make sense? Sometimes I wish we were in the same room so we could have this up on the wall and we could point on that.
Was
So
that to me?
yeah, it was kind of two questions. The airport obviously extended runways. What was that for? My guess is because they put in those new safety measures, but I actually don't know the reason. And then number two, moving those runways closer, to me, it definitely got noisier here. I think that's also when the people from Burlingame started hearing more noise once those runways moved closer to us. And how many of the planes could take off farther down the runway?
Gene,
Yeah.
if I can take the first one for the RSA project, I'll be
I was
happy.
going to ask you to, so yes, please.
All right. So on the image you see on the screen, the two runways that are vertical, one left and one right, were actually shortened, even though the dynamics were slid a bit to allow for the congressionally mandated runway safety area project. If you have 600 feet at either end of the runway, you don't have to do anything. If you have just open field or whatnot, you're allowed to do that, and it's considered a runway safety area. With one left and one right, we're pretty much landlocked by the freeway and the bay. We didn't quite have 600 feet. So what they did is they put the EMAS in there, which is the compressible foamed concrete that allows the aircraft to stop. And so we were able to do it within 300 feet. And so that is the reason for that on that project and the shortening of those runways.
So I have a follow-up question that I think gets to Chairperson Snyder's question is, as a result of the RSA, Runway Safety Area Project, did the ends of one left and or one right move closer to the freeway?
Did.
Okay.
No doubt about it. I think it was 150 feet and
Okay.
250 or something.
So looking at, again, the orangish colors, because that shows where the highest noise levels are, you can see that would just move 150. Well, it already did move 150 feet closer because that's where they are now. So yes, you would experience more noise from that. The second question you asked, if they started further down the runway, would the noise get more up into the hills? And I would say not more than they do already, because they already have that situation. When they roll down the runway, they are there anyway. So, you know, the noise would be similar to what it is today, but you wouldn't have it start at the end of the runway. So again, you would move, if we did what we call intersection takeoff, say we moved it 300 feet to the north, it would be 300 feet further away from the community at that point.
So, and therefore all that noise would have more time before it hit houses to dissipate, or at
Right.
least not hit as many houses up the hill.
Right. So the noise.
One question, and then I see Tom Hamilton. I just want to make sure I'm using the right terminal. So it was a runway safety area. And Bert, what was those fluffy things that are at the end of the runways now? What are they called?
EMAS,
EMAS.
EMAS. It's a compressible foamed concrete. They're concrete blocks, but they're basically foamed so that when a heavy object rolls up on them, they compress and act like brakes, external brakes.
Okay. And Jean, did I interrupt you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, again, if you're looking at these charts that Kathleen has on the screen, basically you just move all that noise however far north you move the start and takeoff roll, right? So everything just kind of moves along with it. You can see where you would get the reduction.
Okay. I have a follow-up question, Tom. I see your hand there. So in the olden days where I live, which is above farther west than City Hall, we were within the noise contour. Now I'm guessing that that was a stage 1, 2, or 3 jet engines. And that once we went to stage 3, 4, 5, FAA pulled the contours back. But now we've moved the runways closer to Millbrae Burlingame, and there was no change in the contours. And my guess or my gut feeling is because the FAA pays more attention to the noise when an aircraft is in flight, so it's left the ground, than it does when it's departing. Am I wrong or am I right?
That would be an incorrect statement. So
Okay.
the AADT does take into account the start of takeoff roll noise, the rolling down the runway noise, the departure noise, and then on arrival, it also takes into account the thrust reverse noise. So AADT handles all the noise sources of an aircraft as it arrives and departs a runway.
I hear you, Jean, and I wish I could believe you. It just doesn't feel like that. So I'll hold off on that for a while because it doesn't, I use white noise now to get to sleep at night. And I'm downstairs on a hillside, and the noise and the vibration can be so bad that it will wake me up, that it will move my bed across the floor. So I just have a hard time believing that. And I don't take that personally. It does not feel true. So with that, Member Hamilton.
So thank you. I had a question regarding the rolling takeoffs, and everything that was said makes perfect sense in terms of when you can do it, when you can't do it, when it's super busy, and you need to have the airplanes queued and ready to go. But especially in the nighttime hours and when things aren't so busy, my question would be that when you meant, obviously, since one right is longer than one left, can one right be prioritized potentially in the nighttime hours to then facilitate the rolling takeoffs at times when the traffic is low? Is that a possibility?
First, I think Bert would better answer that. But first, before you get to that, Bert, I was going to say the runway length doesn't come into effect on rolling departures. They don't need any more or any less runway to depart.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I heard that earlier. So
No, it was meant for if you do what we call intersection departures, where you don't use the full length of the runway. Then because one right is longer, you could probably get by with doing an intersection departure more than you could on one left.
I see. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
My other question had to do with when we do the studies like the ones we're seeing, what we're seeing on the screen. Does weather ever come into effect in terms of like when there's a lower cloud cover? Does that affect the way that the sound goes? I know that at least for me, we don't get the backblast noise that we're seeing on the screen here where I am in San Bruno. But I do know that, for example, I don't usually hear the train, but when the fog is in and there's a low cloud cover, the train sounds like it's in my backyard.
So Yeah, so there are two weather conditions, and sometimes they go together, but there are two weather conditions that mostly affect the phenomenon that you're talking about. Because, you know, sometimes, especially with start a takeoff roll type noise, sometimes communities say we don't hear them. And other times it's like they're taking off from their backyard.
Sure.
And so so the first one is wind direction and strength. Okay, so if the wind will carry the noise. Okay, so if you're downwind from the departure, which at they tend to depart into the wind, right? So most of the time you're going to be downwind if you're behind the start of takeoff roll. So depending how strong that wind is, it will carry it. We've measured as much as 20 decibel difference between upwind and downwind in terms of sound propagation of aircraft noise. Okay. But the other phenomenon is temperature inversion, which often will happen with a certain cloud cover. So a lot of people associate it with a cloud cover, but it's really not the cloud cover that does it. It's actually the temperature inversion, because when you have a temperature inversion, it acts as a barrier essentially for noise. And when it hits that area where the temperature inversion is, it's called an inversion layer. When it hits that layer, it comes right back down rather than continuing up into the air. So those are the two items. And the train noise, I would bet, is more of an issue with temperature inversion than wind.
Exactly. In fact, if I may interject, Vince Mestry was brought up a little while ago. He did some very in-depth studies for Oakland Airport on the density of the inversion layers. And my discussions with him on the subject, he said, they're very, very dense, quite dense, more so than other areas. We have a very dense layer. And one of the things that I've learned to do is look out across the bay. And if you notice, as you look towards the East Bay, you see that brown smog layer out there. That is the inversion layer right there holding that down.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get that temperature inversion, whether it's clear, cloudy, or not. And so that's one of the things that we just are unfortunate to have to deal with, but we do deal with it.
And so one of the questions we didn't answer for you, Tom, is that, you know, in these models, is that taken into account? And unfortunately, it is typically not. And that's because we tend to go with standard weather conditions for an annual average day, and also use a 30-year average for those weather conditions. And so temperature inversion, wind is to a degree, because you're always assuming that you're taking off into the wind. So that wind effect is actually in the models, but it's an average wind speed. But temperature inversion is not taken into account in these models.
Okay, great. Then the reason that I asked is that, you know, obviously when these weather events occur and could, you know, and potentially make the noise much louder, even though there's nothing we can really do about it, but having that information and knowing about it might help us to communicate better to our residents. You know, folks who normally don't have too much of a problem with noise, and then all of a sudden, you know, 3 days this week the noise was horrible. If you're then able to point to, well, we had an inversion layer, then, you know, at least it's a little bit more understandable for folks, just for understanding.
Yeah, and we actually did a study a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, at LAX, where there was this community. It was a little bit sidelined, so about where the word Burlingame is in this diagram is about where this community was in association with the runways at LAX. And we actually had these residents that were always calling in to complain. We had them actually note the time and day when they heard the departures or heard the noise. They didn't even know what the noise was because they couldn't see it. All they could do was hear it. And some days they heard it, some days they didn't hear it. Some days it was really loud, some days it wasn't that loud. So anyway, we had them date and time when they could hear them and also rate the loudness. And the loudest times that they rated were 100% during temperature inversions.
Right. So if we were able to have that kind of data, a similar to what we're seeing on the screen, but and this is what it looks like during typically during an inversion layer, and seeing that seeing if the oranges and yellows extend further into the neighborhoods, or perhaps even spotting differently up in the hills the way things reflect. That would be good data to be able to have to share with residents, just so people understand what's happening.
Yeah, that data would be difficult to get because again, the models don't take that into account at this
Right.
point. I will look into it though to see if there are any of the models that, because like this model is not the ADT model. This is
No.
actually one that's meant for ground noise.
Sure.
Anyway, I can look further into that and see.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep.
We typically, when contacted by residents, share with them the information of the inversion layers and the different weather phenomena that cause it to occur.
Mhm.
Also to the seasonal weather issues
Mhm.
are items that we speak with them about too.
Member Hamilton, thank you. That actually opens up a new doorway. Something that we've lost going virtual, but each one of us who is a Roundtable member, we're supposed to be that point of contact for our own public on information. And I've never used inversion layer. I hadn't made that connection. I will point, as some of you know, I lived in Mountain View for 20 years. I still have a house down there, and we have Shoreline Amphitheater, which is a lovely community benefit out there. But during inversion layers, the sound of the concert would bounce into a particular neighborhood in Palo Alto. And they complained so much that now Shoreline Amphitheater has to stop concerts at 10 o'clock at night, which sadly means we don't get Bruce Springsteen anymore and other groups that like to play for long concerts. But that was a change that the city of Mountain View did back then because of the inversion layer. That's a whole new set of things to think about. Member Royce, you had given a recommendation. Could we, what would be, Kathleen, a recommendation? And even Bert, if it's just adding to the talking points given to the elected officials, given to our own city staff of why people experience things at different times. Like my Millbrae residents, sometimes they complain about alternate flow, but they understand that that's a safety issue. So when those planes are taking right over us, they get it. They don't get it why sometimes it seems to happen when it's not a bad weather day. But if you could help us with the talking points, maybe that will help. Understanding sometimes helps
We've
on that.
done
So I
quite
like
a
that.
bit to our website to enhance it with just nuts and bolts information. We're adding more all the time. We also have the noise portal, which is specific to areas. So there's quite a bit there. I know a lot of people don't use that reference, and we wish they would use it more. Oftentimes I will, when I'm speaking with somebody, guide them as we both are going through the website and talking about the items together.
And that sounds great, Bert. The problem is all of us electeds, we're split over so many different areas and so many topic areas that you become, it's sometimes really hard to shift
Understood.
from one
Understood.
functional area to another. So talking points, the same way we would have talking points in a disaster. Dumb question then. Inversion layers are a function of heat. We see the brown as a function of pollution, which is linked to spare the air days. Is there a link between spare the air days and worse sound levels? Because that's something people can understand, because our message to the public then is, please drive less. Please
I would
don't
say
contribute.
yes. I would say
So,
yes, as a good general rule of thumb.
So this is a whole new thing to kind of think about and figure out how we can better message on that. So I know we're getting, where are we on time? I haven't opened it up to the public yet. Any questions? Linda, Brian, any questions from our auxiliary members? Any other panelists questions on this?
Well, Ann, I would only echo the comments you made. I think there's two things we do. One is we try to solve the problem or mitigate the problem of noise. But the second thing is we try to provide a forum for people to understand what and why and when. And I really am in favor of these so-called cheat sheets or myths and facts. And I really think it may be beneficial for us to pursue some sort of quick summaries of explanations that we can either link to the SFO website or put on our websites. Because one of the things that confuse people is trying to go 20 different places. Because, whether they get, you said it very well. We get confused, public gets confused about when they got questions about noise, questions about water, questions about garbage. They get tired of having to figure out where the heck to go. And so to the extent we can streamline that on a town website that hyperlinks or links to this really makes a lot of sense. We had to give some thought to that.
I think that's fantastic. I see Brian Perkins' hand up. If we started working on that, Kathleen, Angela, can we add this as a future agenda item? And maybe we can start working on some draft verbiage on that, because I know our website here in Millbrae, well, I hate to admit it, our website is so small, we can't add new pages. And we have to invest in $1 million to upgrade and port over our website. So we are just, I guess, 0 and 1 limited on our website, which breaks my heart. Because at least then, Bert, you point people to your website. I like to point people to our website, but I really like member voices. If all of our cities that get impacted by different experiences, we can better explain that. I love that idea. Mr. Perkins, please.
It just occurred to me, and I'm sure the airport's already doing something like this, but when there's an inversion layer, then, or perhaps even, I suppose, wind that might carry the sound a lot, does the airport make an effort to use social media to get that message out? Because I know that you'd use social media for the other purpose, when the planes are going to be flying low over Millbrae and that sort of thing. But do you use the social media tools to get the efforts out about weather-related noise phenomena? I think you're still muted, Bert.
There we go.
There you go.
We will when it's definitely the winds. As far as inversions go, we don't get the sonding data for that. That would be 24 hours after the fact for us on that. It would be useless at that point, unless we have multiple days of it and we're looking for it to break. But as far as the winds go, we definitely try to change the website and let people know that we're in a, let's say, a 2828 condition landing and departing on 28 versus 28 and 1.
Well, I guess I should have been more specific, because I think that Nextdoor is probably the most popular social media for persons that are concerned about their neighborhood conditions. So I was curious if you used Nextdoor and other sorts of things to get the word.
We don't. One thing we have found with Nextdoor is it's pretty area specific. So since we're San Francisco, if we put out on San Francisco, we might have an issue with that. We'd have to see about getting broader coverage. I don't know how to do that. We deal with their web person to do that.
Yeah,
but
it's available. It's
others,
available. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But as far as others go, we would have to see about doing that.
Yeah, sadly, I think Nextdoor, or maybe it's just mine, I cover such a huge geographical range. And if they don't do the daily digest, I used to be able to keep up. Now I can't. But I like the direction you're going, Mr. Perkins. We have our, and I'm going, well, this isn't really something that would go out on SMC Alert, because that's supposed to be very emergency oriented. But we have our own city email alert system. It's really an e-newsletter. It's not an alert system on that, but maybe that's something else we can add to our next discussion on that, and just try to help people understand why they're experiencing this in this set of conditions. Hopefully that makes them know that it's not going to be like that forever, and it's only going to be during these times. But again, I will point out, maybe if our inversion layers continue to get bad, or when it was really bad during the really extreme fires, Bert, when we had those horrible fires and the particulate matter was getting so great, weren't more airplanes taking off using 19 at that time? We had a period a few years ago when the sky, when you couldn't see.
Air traffic control was doing everything they could to keep aircraft going in directions that were not into the dense smoke.
Yeah.
And so, and away from the firefighting efforts and everything else when they were nearby. So yeah, there were issues where they were taking off around the globe, as we called it, using all the different runways.
Right. So I think Mr. Perkin brings up a great point. Kathleen, if we can add to our next agenda, how we, what's a good title? Better messaging conditions. Kathleen, I know you and Angela
Mhm.
made my rambling into very coherent topics. So please do your magic with that.
You got
I like that idea. At least then we're not making the noise go away, but we're helping with the understanding. And the other part, pardon me, making sure that all of our elected official and our own staffs can better help our public through these times on that. And then just to close out this agenda item, we have a couple of recommendations. Let me make sure I caught them. One is to do some more looking into rolling takeoffs and the difference between rolling takeoff using one right, one left versus one right. And then Jean, if I may not say this the right way, but what happens if, say, some of the smaller airplanes can use their thrust a little bit farther down the runway? Bert, when I first joined the roundtable, I used to sit here at night and I could hear the initial putting your pedal to the metal, and then I could hear it when it was taking off. At least that's how I thought it was explained to us. We hear the first and then we hear the second. I don't hear that as much anymore. And I don't know why I don't hear that as much. I don't know if it's the new buildings at the BART station or I just don't know. The runways have moved closer since then. Maybe there's something different going on in there. But if we can look at that experience, and maybe that's just where I live in Millbrae, I don't know how that is experienced by Burlingame or by Hillsborough. When I've been up in Hillsborough, I hear both how incredibly noisy 280 is. Al, I've been meaning to talk to you about what we might be able to do with 280 on that. Incremental noise reductions from all sources is my new mantra on that. But it is incredibly noisy up at the golf course, and it's airplanes. I mean, it's definitely airplane departure noise up there. Any other comments on that? I'm going to open it to the public. And then if there's no public and no other, I see no hands raised from the public. I don't see any of the people from Burlingame, which reminded me, I did not put this out on Nextdoor to remind people. So I'll try to do better in the future. With that, any other questions on this? If not, we will roll into the second agenda item. So closing
So,
agenda.
Ann, just to make sure,
Yeah,
we
go
have
ahead.
two recommendations. I'm sorry, Ann.
No,
we
no,
have
go
two
ahead, please.
I'm sorry, we have two recommendations with respect to mitigating takeoff noise. And do we also have a recommendation on communications to explore further the linkage between town websites and SFO websites?
Yes.
Is that a
Yes.
separate recommendation that's being
Well,
made? Okay.
Correct. Well, and I
Okay.
think that that's easy enough for us to put on our agenda. Maybe we can find some time to work on some messaging before the next public meeting. But I would also add to that the request, if you two both agree, for the technical working group to look at the results from the CTAC study. So we don't have to wait until
I'm fine.
November.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I'm fine with
actually,
that.
yeah.
And I'm only reiterating so we have a record of it because I lose track of what we're recommending and not recommending. So, okay.
Absolutely. And I had a long fire discussion this morning with something our cities are going over, Al. So my head is actually more in fire disaster than I am in airport. Okay, so any other questions? I don't see any other hands raised. Angela, are we okay?
Yes, Chair, I do not see any virtual hands raised from the public either.
Okay. And then, so closing this agenda item. And
Could I make one more comment, by the way? And this is, Ann, if I might. And this is
absolutely,
beyond
absolutely, yes.
ground-based noise. We're talking about communications. And Linda, I know you're all over our Simplicity app, which is San Mateo County app, I think. I wonder if it makes sense, Bert, if there's some way we can link the SFO to the Simplicity app too, because that seems to be a coming trend. I don't know if Linda, have you any thoughts on that, or Bert, but that might be another venue for communications because we're trying to get people to move to that app, I think.
Ms. Wolin, I know nothing about Simplicity app. Would you mind sharing what that is?
I have to say that I don't know what Member Royce is referring to either.
Oh, I'm sorry. There was an app that was rolled out in Hillsborough that effectively has communications coming from the town of Hillsborough, coming from the San Mateo County, coming from the city school board, coming from the fire department, coming from the libraries. And it's designed to have in one place, some sort of central place that affects the city and the agencies of the city along with the county. So, you know, our e-announcements are posted there. I'm looking at the county segments right now. They have the board of supervisor meetings, status of women meetings. It's just sort of a one central spot where people can find out what's going on.
That sounds like something unique to the town of Hillsborough, but our county communications team is sending out all the county stuff that you mentioned. And that comes from a single point in the county, which has a lot of experience in kind of targeted communications that we've been discussing. So I would offer to connect our social media folks with Bert or the appropriate people at SFO when we sort of figure out what it is we're trying to do.
Okay, but it's a new app, and I thought it came from the county, and we just joined
No,
in
it's,
on it.
I just looked it up, Member Royce. It looks like the town of Hillsborough enrolled in it. So I would imagine that somebody through the government there in the town of Hillsborough is consolidating this information from various places and pushing it out to your residents. Which is great.
My mistake then. I'm sorry. My mistake. I thought it was a county app. My mistake.
Well, actually, Al, you've just given me something for my to-do list. That sounds fantastic. Instead of these multiple little ones, you know, there's SMC alert, but that's for very critical work. So I'm going to go look into that too. Linda, if you hear anything, if you wouldn't mind just CCing me so I can learn, I would appreciate that. I would say just before we close out this item, it's still, I'll be on the record, I don't understand the 65 decibel contours when we have so many, and I think it's all in the averaging. And Jean, you pointed out the 30-year weather averaging. We're in a climate change world now. 30-year averaging for a 100-year flood it's not relevant anymore. It's not. We had 3 100-year floods in 2 months. So using some of that old data, I would like to see us have a discussion item in the future, Kathleen, of the types of metrics that make the contours irrelevant to those of us who live close in and behind the runways. Does that make sense, what I just said? I'd like to be able to talk about it. We uniquely identify the changes. That's why I think other people from the region keep saying, Anne, look at a NEEM. Maybe that will help us a little bit on there. But right now, the contours do not make sense to me. That orange circle, the orange blob continues all the way up into our hillsides. And so I'm, to be honest, I'm a little aggravated when I see these and I see the contours, because it's not what my people and other adjacent people are subjected to day in and day out on that. So I'll just close with that, but I'd like us to really dive into what would we specifically want the FAA to change in how they develop their noise contours. Because in a practical sense, that means anybody who didn't insulate their homes in the old 65 decibel in Millbrae have no chance. And those who did, like my house, which were done in 1990 and the windows have all failed, we have no chance. And it bugs me on that. All right, moving along to the next agenda item. And this is a discussion on how to obtain data on noise impacts of aircraft taxiing or holding for takeoff near departure end of runway 01. And I think that's, well, it would be left or right. It wouldn't matter. They both come down that way. And this is an item for Bert and Eugene. Just to let you know how we got to that, Kathleen and I were brainstorming and talking about 2 Millbrae neighborhoods, but remember Hamilton, it could also possibly be Lameda Park School, which is a school shared by both San Bruno young people and Millbrae young people. The difference for San Bruno is we're right across the street from each other. The school is in Millbrae, and San Bruno neighborhood right across the street is considered a priority equity community, but Millbrae is not, the way the census tracts are drawn. And that limits what we can do to protect this school. I will tell you, high-speed rail in their EIR for this very same school said, yeah, the trains will be running at well over 65 decibels, but the school's 60 feet away, so it won't impact them. And that just simply is not true. on that. So looking at taxiways, and the taxiways sort of point into a neighborhood called Bayside Manor and Marina Vista neighborhoods, and then a little bit past it towards Lamita Park School if you're looking at Google on a Google map, and then into, I don't know, Tom, your neighborhood right there by it's not San Jose, is it San Miguel? The street that cuts in near
San
where you're
Antonio.
doing, I'm sorry?
San Antonio.
Is it San Antonio and San Anselmo are shared street in there, that neighborhood tucked up in there. So with that, Bert and Jean, take it away.
Actually, Anne, I have an image to share.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Madam Chair.
Kathleen.
Yeah.
It's back to you now, Kathleen.
I just want to share an image to set the scene for this. Give me just a second here. I only have one monitor also. Okay, screen share. So excuse me, this will just take a second to make the transition. And if I can just basically explain what you're going to be seeing, so and then the experts can dive into it a bit. Knowing now that HMMH has recently done this CTAC study, a lot of this probably will be more appropriate to that time period. If you want to spend some time now, at least introducing the concept, I think that would be great, with the understanding that HMMH study would be very definitive on much of this. This is going to be non-scientific. This is just an idea to set the scene for what we're talking about. And this is, first of all, just a Google map perspective of, can everyone see the screen okay? We're good on this? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're good.
It's just a perspective on looking down runway 1 left and runway 1 right. And in front of us, I don't have a good cursor, to just off the 1 right, 1 left, you'll see Bayside Manor Park. And that area is Millbrae to the left and essentially Burlingame to the right. Not exactly, but close to it. And then as we get a little bit closer in on this same vision, we see again runway 1 left and 1 right. And these are our takeoff runways we're talking about. And we see that there are some communities that are very, very close to the runway ends, to the left of what's labeled In-N-Out Burger here. There's something called Bayside Manor, is that right? And
Correct.
And Marina
Marina
Vista.
Vista.
Yeah. And just to get an idea of how close those communities are to the airport, I mean, you can see them, but this is looking at, excuse me, let me move this little thing out of the way. Now here we're looking at Bayside Manor in the foreground, and 1 left is right here, 1 right is to the right edge of the image. And this, I think we've got one more that gives you, oops, not that one, sorry. It gives you a good perspective of how close some of these houses are to the edge of the runway, to the edge of the taxiways here. It's, according to the Google map measuring stick, it's, something akin to 600 or 700 feet. So they're very close to the end of what are taxiways behind and to the side of runways 1 left and 1 right. And so this was a discussion that the chair wanted to talk about, if there would be anything that could be done to address the taxiing and the holding or positioning of the airplanes down in this area, what they may be. And as I say, HMMH will have more, I think, definitive info, but to give you an idea of how this would work, or how this does sort of work. Now, forgive me, this next slide is not data. It is a concept. It is just an idea of what happens in this taxi area. Okay, not data, just a concept to give you an idea, because it looks like a cartoon feature, and I fully admit that, but it gives you an idea what these airplanes are doing. This big round thing to the left of this is the terminal, with all the little fingers of the concourses that come off of the various terminal tiers. And when the airplanes come out and they want to take off on runway 1 left or 1 right, again, those are the ones right above Bayside Manor here. There's many, many, many ways for these airplanes to get to the ends of the runway. This is just a straightforward, simplistic approach on how it is often done. And that is that you've got a group of airplanes that are going to be coming down a taxiway that's close to the runways, another group that might be coming in to the ones close to the terminal. And yeah, this is probably more crowded than it often is at San Francisco, but I'm guessing about 6 o'clock in the morning, this wouldn't be uncommon. And the ones close in will very often go to one left, and the ones close to the terminal will turn around, come out right along this area here that is very close to Bayside Manor, and come in position to take off home run right. This is not by any means 100% of what happens, and there are lots of little side roads, if you will, side taxiways that people can maneuver different ways, but this is a concept of what you may see frequently. So this gives you an idea of how close these airplanes are to the communities and why this is up for discussion. I'm sure, Jean, you can tell us a lot. Bert, of course, you work there every day. So this is just for your discussion. I don't know what slide you want to see. But. So, Madam Chair.
I think we start on this slide, but I see that Tom Hamilton, you have a question.
Mhm.
Maybe go to there before we start.
And I don't want to be premature with my questions. If you guys want to present
No,
more
go
stuff,
ahead.
I can hold.
Go ahead.
So this is really interesting, and it goes back to the question that I kind of misasked earlier when we were talking about prioritizing one runway over the other. But obviously, when things are busy, based on this, when things are busy and both runways are in use, then this would make seeing both of these paths being used concurrently makes a lot of sense. And in fact, I was part of this. I just landed from a business trip last night, and when I took off on Sunday, this is exactly the pattern that was being used, because there was lots of planes taking off. But when things are quieter, and perhaps at night when there's not as much traffic, if planes were able to be prioritized to runway one right, and then perhaps be able to continue down the runway a little farther before beginning their takeoff roll, because it's a longer runway, would they be forced to taxi all the way down here to the bottom of the image, or would they, if there's no traffic on 1L, can they cut across at that other area that's farther up the runway?
They could definitely cut across. They could
definitely cut across, depending on what's going on with the operations at the time.
Okay.
It's just a matter of, are we able to get the FAA to condone that? Now, another thing too is, if you look at the areas that have those striped lines near the lettering and numbering on the runways, one left and one right, you can see the aircraft on the right runway is pointing right at that. So the left runway, if we actually got the aircraft to take off at the numbers or over that area, the touchdown zone, it's actually further away from the community. Now, as far as the distance between using the left and the right at that point, it's going to be minimal. If you went and used those areas for PowerPoints. Now, the other issue that we have too is that end around taxiway there for the right runway. See about not using that at night. Something like that would be useful too. During the wee hours of the morning, it's tough. They're using every bit they can. Another idea that was brought up earlier was single engine taxi. A lot of airlines do that, especially with fuel costs being so high. It's something they do as a lifesaver. Now, as they get closer towards the end of the runways, they do have to have both engines running. So where those airplanes are sitting closest to Highway 101, all engines are going to be running on those airplanes, no matter what's going on. Another thing they're doing in Europe that we've been sort of asking around about are the taxi bots. So basically a electric nose wheel shuttle that the aircraft rolls up onto, or the device scoops it up and then locks it in, and then they roll it out towards the end of the runway towards a a PowerPoint where they can start their engines and then taxi from there. It would help with the 2.8s, but not a whole lot with the ones, because like I said, where they're going to be there getting ready to take off, they're going to be powered up and they're going to be both engines, and they're going to be noisy.
I was waiting for somebody to let me raise my hand. Question. Kathleen, this is marvelous. I've never really looked at the airport from this perspective before. So thank you so much for this. And thank you, Member Hamilton and Bert, for the comments. If you look at the photograph right here and you look to the far left and you see both the new part of Terminal 1 and you see the gates on both sides, and then you see the international terminal, and I don't know what to call the southernmost arm of the international terminal. What this is showing just the noise to Bayside Manor. Marina Vista, which is actually the oldest neighborhood in Millbrae, it was subdivided in 1885, and the freeway used to be nowhere near there. I'm doing research into how the heck was the freeway ever allowed to get so close to Millbrae when the old Bayshore Freeway would have been out sort of where 28 and 1, runways 28 and 1 meet. That's where the freeway should have been. Instead, it was diverted into Millbrae. But that little neighborhood called Marina Vista is right off of the international terminal. And part of this discussion would be which gates would they use? And if we're just looking at nighttime and we're looking at, I believe the airport's back to about 75% capacity, but I'm guessing that missing 25 is a lot of the international flights, if China hasn't opened up all its airports, for example. But if they're using the gates that the back of the APUs are pointing to Terminal 1's south branch, whatever that concourse is called, then that noise isn't deflecting straight into Bayside Manor. If you go there day, sometimes at night, it's actually quiet, but it is horrendously noisy right there. And it's a combination of 101 traffic, it's a combination of the noise moving around the new hotel and the APUs and the taxiing that far down. So Kathleen, when we dive into this at our next meeting, I love what you did there. Maybe you can do your conceptual magic of that. And I know that the airport, I know that airlines rent their gates, but maybe at night, if they use the gates on the inside of this U instead of the outside, the northern outside of the U, that might help keep things quiet at night. Or I don't know, quiet Sundays or quiet Mondays. I mean, obviously there are more flights on different days of the week, but if that neighborhood could get to have a barbecue and actually be able to talk when they're outside, would be a win on that. So if we can look into that, but this is, Kathleen, if you can, I don't know about the others, but if you could send me your slides, I want to sit down with my city manager and hopefully our new incoming public works director and talk about what we can do on
I'd be
this.
happy to, sure.
Members, any questions on what we're trying to hope if there might be some minor changes done at the ground level that could provide some immediate relief? It's still, Bert, sometimes, and it's not every night of the week. Sometimes I think it's a Tuesday and then there'll be a very loud Wednesday from midnight, actually sometimes starting at about 11 o'clock at night until 1 o'clock in the morning. It almost seems like it's constant flights taking off. There's no break in noise. There are peaks and valleys, but there's no breaks. Are there just certain nights that more flights take off? They choose that they for whatever reason. Why do some nights seem so much noisier than others?
Well,
or is it the inversion layer?
There's kind of all the above. There's a lot of actions going on. First of all, you have the airlines' different schedules for different days of the week. And then two, we've all heard about the delays that the airlines and the air traffic control systems experiencing. So there's a lot of things going on with delays and everything else. Typically, we have summer thunderstorms back east. That throws a wrench into everything too. And so it's really hard to say. Now, I will say that typically we're going to find that our Tuesdays are going to be one of our slower days. And then we get into Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday are going to be peak days where people are going to be coming and going from vacations, things like that. Mondays, obviously, Sunday night and Mondays, business trips. And then Friday, come home. So it's kind of hard to really put a foot down on it right now. And normally during a non-post-COVID season, I would say that we can get a little more specific. Right now, it is so dynamic, I can't tell you.
Well, that
Member Schneider,
reflects
if it-
my experience. I can't find one night. I think probably the one that I personally find most irritating are the Sundays, because you're trying to get ready for we're trying to get ready for our own work days. And sometimes I'm not asleep until 2 or 3, except now I play The Sound of Rain on there. That's my, and it seems to be working. And I hate to tell my residents that might be the trick, but a little meditation on that. But Sundays, I think, are the hardest ones to experience, because you want to start your work week fresh and you're not able to start your work week fresh. So I guess we'll see now that we're at 75% and China has reopened, what it might be.
Member Schneider, if it helps, just speaking as a passenger going through the airport a lot, because I have to travel for work, it is absolutely variable, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of rhyme or reason. I mean, obviously, Mondays and Fridays tend to be super busy and all that. But, as an example, I landed last night at, 10 p.m. and and I usually get, when I fly back, I take the same trips over and over again. So I'm usually landing around the same time. And on a typical night, I would just breeze right through the terminal going out to the curb to get picked up, and it was packed. It was 10:15 at night on a Wednesday, and Terminal 3 was the busiest I'd ever seen, and I could barely walk out. So I mean, it's just there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to it. So I just that's not the answer you want, but it's the reality of.
No, it's what I experience. It's just, as if I wasn't a council member, I'm just a resident and I'm trying to plan my week and I don't know this. I mean, sometimes I try to go to bed early so I sleep through the worst of it. But if I don't hit that sweet spot, I'm awake for hours, and I'm just one of 23,000 people on that.
Well,
So
and I can add my experience to what Tom said too, is that there had been a lot of thunderstorms on the East Coast. I was actually delayed getting out of the East Coast, and I was coming into San Francisco, and I was delayed by 2 hours, which got me in there at like 10:30, and then it was going to go back out. So it was 2 hours late going back out as well. So
Right.
that's the type of thing that Bert was talking about, is that sometimes there is no rhyme or reason that you don't know of, but there are, thunderstorms on the East Coast that delayed the aircraft getting into San Francisco, and it's doing its turn to get back out. So,
and I hear you. And again, trying to get our public to understand,
right.
But it also leads me to, if we know that there's bad weather, not we, the residents surrounding the airport, but if we know that flights are going to delay, and I know our mantra is, thou shalt not move noise to another location. But if there could be instead of a 1 departure, there's a 28 departure that does the right turn out over the bay and goes out night hush, is that a solution?
Well,
and then I understand that the airlines get to choose their own runway. So how do we let the airlines know that if your flight has been pushed off for very valid reasons, whatever, but you're still taking off? And I swear to gosh, sometimes it's one plane after another. And in my notes by my bed, it's every minute taking off, high peak noise every minute for about 2 hours, maybe with a couple of valleys in there. But why couldn't some of those take off on 28, assuming it's not going to impact San Bruno, not gap departures, not, and now I'm looking at South City adding all that new housing on their airport boulevard. I get where the airport is coming from on that, but are there some other alternatives for nighttime on that? So this particular agenda item is taxiing and waiting, but if we're going to have more thunder showers, we're going to have more extreme weather going into a climate change future, how are we going to adapt to that?
Well, I think all this does play in, and I think San Francisco does have a runway use program. So maybe we review the runway use program, kind of understand, okay, maybe between these hours, we have try to come up with a new runway use plan, because I think it all plays in, because if they're not taxiing out to go to one right, but they're going to 2A left or right, obviously you're going to get rid of some of this taxiing noise as well as the start of takeoff wheel noise. In terms of what this agenda item is, though, is taxi, is that, again, you can do a single engine taxi, but you'd want them to be sure when they're at that place right next to Highway 101. Yes, both engines have to be on, but you only need to spool up the left engine because it's a little bit further away from the community, spool up that left engine to get out to the runway, and then you can spool up both engines to take off. So I did want to mention one of the things that we learned in our Seattle study was that the FAA is actually working on a sequencing program to where they actually don't have the aircraft leave the gate, unless of course the gate is needed for another flight, but not leave the gate until it can be cleared all the way to the runway, so that you don't have these long queues waiting to take off. They are working on that, and hopefully, there'll be something in a year or two to where, that can be done, except for the case when you need the gate, right? Because I've also sat out on the tarmac for 45 minutes waiting for a gate to open. So I also get that you need to sometimes pull away from the gate. But again, they're working on software to where you wouldn't have this situation that you see here, that the airplanes would just go to the runway when they know that there's a spot for them rather than queuing up at the edge of the runway.
Gene, that's lovely. And of course, that's a climate change activity too, running on electricity at the gate versus running on a jet engine on there. What did you call that? FAA sequencing?
I don't know the full term for it, but it is it's something about a sequencing program.
Okay.
It's part of the
Sequencing program.
time-based flow metering, isn't it, Gene?
It is, but it's specific to on ground
Yeah.
versus
Yeah,
in
yeah.
air. So
It's
there's
just
a
the ground
slightly
component.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
I think that sounds great, Gene. And we're getting close to the end. I've let conversation go long in case we brainstorm something by getting the chance to speak with each other. If there are no other member questions on this, Kathleen, I think Gene gave us a great future topic, which is to look at the SFO runway use program on that, if we can do that as a future topic.
Got it.
And that might be something of interest to both departures and arrivals too. But I'm being selfish right now and looking at just what happens at the ground level and just at the nighttime level. And thank you, Gene, for the FAA sequencing program, something that would work. And again, big picture climate change, I get it all. The more we can get electric is great. And Bert, I thank you for your comment that in some airports, they're going to use an electric taxi. I missed the term. Did you call it a taxi bod?
Bot. B-O-T.
B-O-T.
Like robot. Yeah.
Okay, taxi bot. I think and obviously electric vehicles are so much more quiet than any jet engine. So all of that is good. With that, I'm checking to see, Angela, do you see if there's any members from the public? And
Thank you, Chair Schneider. I do not see any virtual hands raised from members of the public for
Okay.
this item.
I see that we do have a gentleman and I'm assuming that's United Airlines. I still would like, well, we're going to move into the final agenda item, which is just sort of what to do the next time, is to get Boeing and Airbus, et cetera, to work on reducing departure noise, to reduce low frequency noise, which, having read through part of the documents that we can't share yet, we know low frequency noise is very hard to mitigate. The procedures might be some success, but if we could get the jet engine manufacturers to figure out how to take that noise and turn it back into power instead of a pollutant, that would be the best of all worlds on that. So I don't see any other hands raised. Member Royce, Member Hamilton, anything else? The other thing that Kathleen and I talked about with the airport next expansion, creating Concourse 8 off of Terminal 3, Kathleen's going to be reaching out to make sure where the gates are going to be located. Mr. Hamilton, those would be the gates that would then be approaching your neighborhood and Lamita Park School on that.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I think since it's listed on my copy of the agenda, I think Mr. Ganong is probably able to briefly respond on a couple of
can.
those items.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay.
So let's see, we'll go share screen real quick. So this is actually up on the SFO website. You're familiar with terminal A, B, C, D, E, F, G existing. Terminal H is going to be over here. They'll have to remove one gate on G to install this bump out, but it would be 6 additional. Well, 5 if you consider the 6 additional total, but
6 new, one goes away.
6 new, removing 1. Thanks, Gene. And so tails in towards the airfield, which is very good news for the community. And it's supposed to be a 3 to 4 story building. A couple of things to keep in mind. It's not been approved yet. It's concept only. It's at least 10 years out. No NEPA, no CEQA on it right now at all. And it would stay below the, we're below the max capacity. We don't intend to exceed max capacity the runways can handle, so that wouldn't do anything for that. Might reduce runway taxi time and parked aircraft out on the periphery of the airfield.
Very good. Thank you, Bert. That's a great drawing. I didn't see that when I looked at the draft.
And
Or
it's on
the-
it's on the website. So flysfo.com about construction SFO tomorrow. And there are other images of the different concept too, but this is one kind of akin to what Kathleen was doing today with the oblique view.
Very good. And that's, you're in the preparation of the EIR, EIS for that, correct?
Right
The
now,
NOP went out a
it's
few years ago.
still drawings, and they're doing it piece by piece by piece. So,
Okay.
you know, all these areas are things that they would like to or in process of doing.
So my understanding is it's not at the environmental stage yet. CEQA,
No
because
NEPA,
you
no
have to
CEQA at this point.
Right, because you haven't decided on what you're actually going to do.
Correct.
So it's still in that early part of the notice of project.
Conceptual. It's
Yeah, okay.
conceptual.
Concept design.
Okay. Because Millbrae will be commenting on that when the time comes on that. So we're watching that one. All right. So closing that item out, Kathleen, anything? We're ready to move to the next agenda item?
I believe that's it,
Okay.
yes. Do we need public comment on anything further?
Oh, I checked and there were no hands raised.
Okay.
Angela, you didn't see it. Did you have anybody? I don't see anybody on the phone.
That is correct, Chair
Okay.
Schneider. There are no hands raised.
Thank you. All right, moving on to SFO updates. And we have, this is for Bert, Aneem, the director's report, and we just did. Oh, there, we just did it. Concourse H. So take it away, Bert.
Okay, just one moment. Are we at our stop time?
We are,
Probably.
yes.
It's the switching back and forth between screens. It's just at 2:30. Bert, just if you could just really quickly tell us where we are for the inclusion of
All right.
low frequency noise.
Real fast. We're redesigning the director's report to be able to handle both Aneem and C-weighted. That design is in place, ready to go. We're still visioning Aneem and C-weighted doesn't appear on our screen at the moment right now. They're in 2 worlds. Aneem in particular is what they call a shadow table, separate from our normal data tables that we work with. And so that one we're trying to get brought into a world where we can see both the NPD data and the Aneem data. The C-weighted is just something we'll query in and bring it with it. And so that will be there as well. So pretty much the same concept as you've seen in the past. It would just be bringing all 3 into it together.
So at the working group meeting a week and a half ago, you brought a new page that's going to be attached to the director's report that's about GBAS.
Mhm.
Are you ready to share perhaps at the full roundtable in August or the working group meeting what this a NEAM C-weighted design director's report look, or are we waiting until November for that? Is there a way that we can see what you've got just in a draft
I've-
form?
I've been really pressing our vendor hard. Let me see if I can at least get a draft concept
Okay.
that we can share.
And then staff, just because we're not meeting until November, if we can get something that Bert can share either at the full roundtable so we can start thinking about it. I can't speak for the others, Bert, but I have to sit on this and look at it and then go away and come back and look at it to absorb all that information on that. So give us time to absorb it.
Trust me, I know. I actually want to show you really quickly what we have to do to
And I appreciate the members hanging on. We're almost done here. We'll be a few minutes late.
see a NEAM. It's actually this is how we're doing the comparison work. So this is NPD NPD up here, and this is a NEAM down here. So that would be a threshold line that you see there. But as you go through these events, you can see operation numbers appear, and it says it's a takeoff. And then we're talking about an Airbus A321. But since it's below the line, it doesn't match that red swoop there, which is one that would capture it. Now under a NEAM, same thing. And so this is what we've actually been going through to make it a system that we can actually use. And this is for our Site 13 up in Hillsborough. But just that was a real quick what we've been doing to compare the two. And yes, it's been really exciting and learning something new, but also very daunting.
You know, Bert, this is lovely. I can see how it's not ready for the full roundtable yet.
Right.
But so maybe the working group would be really lovely so that we have time to get, to dive
Amen.
into it on that. That would be lovely. Members, any other comments? Okay. It's for some odd reason, Bert, it's actually been fairly quiet at night lately. So whatever y'all are doing out there, it's better than it was during the wetter or moister reasons in there on that. But thank you all for today. Thank you for your comments, and everybody have a really safe time. The president just has COVID after boosted and double vaxxed or double boosted. So please take care and have a terrific remainder. And we'll see you all in a couple of weeks, August 3rd for our next meeting. All right. And I'm very grateful for Kathleen and Angela. We had a great prep meeting. That's probably the most detailed prep meeting I've had since we created ground-based noise. I very much appreciate that. Thank you all, and keep safe. And thank you for the Seattle stuff. I can't wait. We're ready to read about Seattle.
Thanks, Ann. Well done. Okay.
Take
Bye-bye.
care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Have a good day.